Hey there, Bible Blue Rockers. This is Stan Larimer, and this is another episode of Stan's Bible Lecture. And as you can see, I've managed to climb up to the second floor of my home where I got back in my office and have a proper backdrop again with my teddy bear sitting back there. And we're here today to do another lesson. And the title of this lesson is Young Earth Theory. And so, what we're going to be talking about is what scientific evidence do we have that the Earth is young, as in only 6,000 years old? So, that's where we're going to go. What we are going to start out with, though, is looking at a few verses from the Bible that tell us that the Earth is indeed that young. So, Connie, if we can have the next slide. We see that first and foremost, Jesus endorsed Moses as the author of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And he basically said in John chapter 5 to the Pharisees, if you had believed Moses, you would believe me, because he wrote about me. But since you do not believe what he wrote, how will you believe what I say? So Jesus is saying we should believe what Moses wrote in those first 5 books of the Bible. And those first 5 books of the Bible tell us that the earth is only 6,000 years old. So if you're going to have faith in Jesus, then you have to believe what he says. And he says that those words of Moses that were captured in Scripture are true and that we should believe them. Next slide, Connie. So what does it say? Well, in Deuteronomy, we have Moses writing, the Lord gave me 2 stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God, and on them were all the commandments the Lord proclaimed to you on the mountain out of the fire on that day of assembly. Inscribed by the finger of God. So the things that were written on those stone tablets are authored by God explicitly, and Moses then recorded them in his scrolls that contain the book of Deuteronomy and Exodus. Next. And one of the things that was written down in the words that were on those scrolls written by the finger of God on those stone tablets, written in stone, is the 4th commandment, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your maidservant, nor manservant, nor your animals, nor your alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them. But he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So this is where the Lord's finger written in stone that he made the heavens and the earth in 6 days. So the only thing that we could possibly quibble about is what kind of days were those? Is 1 day equal to 1,000 years in the Lord's sight, as some have said, or is this 6 literal days? Well, Genesis, another book that Moses wrote that Jesus said we should believe, says this. Next slide. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and the darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness, and called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. And this same phrase, so the evening and the morning were the second day, the third day, the fourth day. Every single day, we're told, consisted of an evening and a morning. Therefore, the 6 days that the Lord used to create the heavens and the earth were 6 literal 24-hour days. Next. And then we have this chart, which shows the genealogy leading back to Adam. I've got a little bit clearer chart on the next chart, so let's go look at it, which might be a little easier to read. This shows that from the time of Adam going forward, how long it was till he had his son, Seth, and how long after each next generation was born, and how long they lived, leading up to the flood, at which time Noah and his son Shem were the only ones who went across the boundary in the ark. And then you see lifespan started falling off rapidly after that. Obviously, something changed about the earth in that time frame that would cause human lifespans to be reduced. But with this documentation, which Jesus said we should believe that Moses wrote down, we see that the total time from when Adam was created on the sixth day, we also see that there's a specific number of years, which is about 1900 years leading up to the time of the flood, or to the time of when Abraham was born. And then we know from Abraham's time forward down through the genealogies to get to the time of Christ was about 4,000 years. And we've got 2,000 years since then. So we have the Bible's explicit claim, endorsed by Jesus, as written by Moses, that the earth is 6,000 years old. So if we're going to be faithful believers, then we have to ask ourselves, how in the world do scientists claim that the earth is billions of years old? And we're going to look today at a few arguments that say it's probably not that old, although not every one of these arguments is going to show that it's only 6,000 years old. We will cast some doubt on the whole concept of the evolution of the universe. So next slide. One of the first things that we can talk about is the fact that there are missing magnetic monopoles. The whole idea of the Big Bang talks about temperatures high enough that it should have produced tons of monopoles, but we don't see any. A monopole is just a magnet that only has a north or a south, but doesn't have both. Scientists have been looking for them for a long time and have not been able to detect any. They've tried manufacturing them. They have been able to create a few short-lived monopoles, but they have not found any in the universe, which we would expect to find if there really had been a Big Bang 14 billion years ago. Next. Another issue is the universe flatness problem. Now, what this is basically saying is that the mass of the universe out there is incredibly fine-tuned, balanced to be flat, meaning neither expanding nor contracting by very much. If the density of the universe was much greater than 1, we would have everything closed and the universe would slow down and collapse back on itself. And if it is much less than 1, then it would expand forever and depart into oblivion and thin out to the point where there would be no density to have the galaxies that we see today. But what we see here as an amazing fact is that going back in time to the supposed beginning of the universe, the departing would be 1 part in 10 to the 62 or less. So that is saying that we are amazingly fine-tuned for keeping the universe flat. And so that is a significant factor in our questioning of basically how did the universe get that fine-tuned without a creator. Okay, next slide. One of the other things about it is the whole concept of inflation. The fact that the universe is, if you go back in time, the scientists have had to add this idea of rapid inflation. In the first tiny fraction of a second, the universe ballooned to much of its current size and then quickly slowed down to the flatness that we saw in the previous chart and is only expanding at a very slow rate since that time. This is a piece of theory that stretches the credulity, because how in the world did it expand that fast, and what made it slow down when it got to the size that it is today? Next. Another thing that we see is the whole idea of missing antimatter. If the universe was really formed with a big bang, then we would expect to find whenever the energy that it started with, where there was no matter of any kind, it was all just energy, when that energy cools down and converts into matter, it should produce an equal amount of antimatter, and it doesn't. And so when we look out there today at all those galaxies, they're all matter. Where'd the antimatter go? Okay, next slide. Missing population 3 stars. Population 1 stars are like our sun. They're the stars that have lots of metal in them, and that means that they got that metal by condensing out of population 2 stars, which don't have as much metal in them. And population 3 stars are much older and are basically would have nothing but hydrogen in the first few elements in them, because they would not have the ability to create the heavy elements. Those first stars made the heavy elements that show up in the second and third generations, the population 1 and 2 stars. There are no population 3 stars visible. How can this be? And so we see in a typical spiral galaxy like this map of our own galaxy that we have bluish stars on the outside that are mostly population 1, third generation stars, and in towards the middle are much older stars, but still only population 2. And we don't see anything that has the lack of metals. In other words, every star we see out there has metal in them. How did that happen? And where did the original stars that produced that metal come from? Okay, next. Another concept that people talk about is the moon recession. The moon, as it orbits the Earth, is tugged on and tugs on the Earth's oceans and creates a bulge. That bulge tends to pull on the moon at a little bit of an angle that causes it to accelerate just a little bit as the Earth turns under the moon. And that gives the moon an increase in orbit of about 1.5 inches per year, where it's getting further away from us. If you back that up at that rate, you see that we don't have 4 billion years before it hits the ground. In fact, before it would hit the ground, it would hit the Roche limit, which would tear the moon apart and turn it into rings of Saturn. So the moon cannot be something that was created back 4 billion years ago, whenever the Earth was supposedly created. It can only have been around for probably less than 1 billion years without having been broken apart. So we don't have a good explanation for how is it that the moon came to be part of the Earth if it wasn't created in a young Earth scenario. Next. Another factor is we still see comets. Now, comets are things that are generally short-lived. They go around the Earth or come in around the sun and pass through the solar system, and usually wind up hitting a planet or something along the way, or breaking up as they pass close to the sun and heat up. And so the general lifespan of a comet, typically the short period comets like Halley's Comet, a 76-year period, anything under a 200-year period is something that maybe only gets to orbit for 1,000 or 2,000 years before it has come apart and disintegrated. And yet we still see tons of comets. If we were really 4 billion years old, we would not expect there to be many more comets available by this time frame to affect us. That's caused scientists to postulate something called the Oort cloud and the Kuiper belt, two belts of objects, icy snowballs out at extreme distances that theoretically could supply an infinite number of comets. But we, of course, have never actually seen these belts. We've only seen a couple hundred objects out at that distance. So next, the faint young sun paradox. The fact is that the sun, if it follows a normal main cycle star, is going to be increasing in luminosity. And if you run it backwards in time, it dims out to about 40% of what it was originally. And that means that the Earth would have been frozen solid back around about 1.5 billion years ago, when the sun would have been dimmer than it was. So the idea that the sun was around and that we had 4 billion years for life to evolve, now the Earth would have been frozen for much of that time. Okay, next. Oh, there's Kermit the Frog. All right. We have the other idea that stellar evolution may actually occur faster than we think. This is a picture of Sirius, the dog star, the brightest star in the sky. It sits down south of Orion. Orion's belt kind of points at it. And that's a blue-white supergiant star. And yet, if you look at what Ptolemy said in 150 AD, he described it as a red star. We've since discovered that there is a small companion star that is a white dwarf right now, but if it was bright and making Sirius look red back just about 2,000 years ago, then we have a whole different theory for how fast a star can change from a red supergiant into a white dwarf, which is what we see with Sirius B right now. Next. Another thing that we see is spiral galaxy windup. The spiral galaxies that we see have arms that are mostly young blue stars, and everywhere we look, we see these stars which could not possibly be billions of years old and still be young blue stars. And the idea that the outer circles of these arms obviously moving much slower than the inner part of the galaxy, and therefore the galaxy itself would wind up and we wouldn't see those type of spiral arms out there if the galaxies were really as old as the universe of 14 or so billion years. Next. The Earth's magnetic field decay. We've seen that there's been a steady decay since back around the time of Christ. And of course, that magnetic field is what protects life on the planet. And it is steadily decaying. And if you run it backwards in time, if you extrapolated it at the current rates of decay, you would get back about 6,000 years, and it would be too powerful to basically, it would melt the Earth because of the size of the field. We do have some fluctuations that have been seen, reversals that occurred back in the first century or first millennium or so before Christ. And those fluctuations are postulated to possibly have been affected by the flood, so that the collapse of the Earth's shell, the Pangea single continent, and the sliding of the plates in rapid succession during the flood time would have possibly caused the inner magnetism of the planet to shift radically during that period of time, and that may account for the changes that we see in the flood. But this is additional evidence that the Earth is only 6,000 years old if the magnetic field seems to be decaying from some maximum that it could be and still support life. Next. Another factor is supernova remnants are too small. If you go out and look at this one, this is the Crab Nebula. It comes from an explosion of a star about the year 1054, which was bright enough to be seen in the daytime. But since then, it's been expanding out to the current diameter that you see. And what we are looking at right now is basically there are no supernovas out there that have expanded out beyond what the second stage that you see right there, which is about 100 and about a 300-year diameter out to about 150,000 years diameters. And there's nothing that has expanded beyond that. So where are all the supernovas that exist that would have expanded beyond that presumably occurred further back in time? And then finally, we have a slide here that looks at the plastic bending of layers. If you look at the rock layers in this particular picture, and you see this everywhere, there's folding that's occurred without fracturing. That means that these layers were all laid down and were still soft when the Earth moved and folded. And this is indicative of the theory that I talked about in a previous lesson of rapid burial of the continents as the flood occurred. And that we see this happening everywhere. And that says that the rock layers that scientists use to say make the Earth millions of years old are not really that old. They were obviously laid down in rapid succession and bent when they were still soft. So there's a collection of interesting anecdotal information that would cause there to be some evidence that the Earth is actually very young. And at this point, Connie, I think we can take any questions that people may have. Okay, so Betty says, "You look great, Stan." Well, thank you. I feel great. And I hope your mobility is moving along, Crow says. Well, yeah, my mobility has gotten to the point where I can get up here to my office and do my lesson from a better location than where I was doing it before from the kitchen table. So I guess that's partly benefit. I am now up and walking around without a leg brace on under most conditions. Is science so against a creator? Well, unfortunately, science does seem to take that attitude. There are obviously creation scientists that look for the evidence like I've been describing here today, that believe that the Bible is absolutely correct and that Jesus says it is. And therefore, we have people who are willing to believe and look for the evidence that says other things. Science, of course, has changed its attitude on a whole lot of factors. And so we shouldn't assume that scientists are always right whenever they estimate the age of the Earth. Question is, you are ultimately a scientist. How do you believe in a creator and other scientists do not? Well, it to me is self-evident by what has been made. And when you look at everything that has been made, the idea that it evolved by accident and chance is just beyond what I can believe. And I do believe the messages of who Jesus was, and I believe what he said. And so it's really from that point on, once you have accepted Jesus and accepted what people who were eyewitnesses said about what he did and said, then you reach the conclusion that I'm going to go with what the Bible says, even if it disagrees with what scientists say. We've got the university is actually speeding up dark energy. Um, yeah, that's one theory. We don't know whether there is dark energy or not. The Big Bang thing is way off. I wonder why it stayed on TV so long. Yeah. Krause says, looking good, Stan. Do you believe there's life out there other than here on Earth? Well, the Lord has populated every ecological niche on this planet with life, and He's got all those other planets out there that He could put stuff on. But His primary purpose is creating the Earth as a habitat for man, His crowning creation. And so it's not clear to me that He would have any need to put life elsewhere. I don't think that there would be intelligent life that would be in need of a savior, because then He would be in the mode of going to every one of those places and dying for their sins. And that seems like a little bit unlikely to me. But, the Lord's capable of anything, and so who knows? What do you think the fire from the heavens will be during Revelation? Well, that's a good question. It could be, uh, fiery meteor showers coming down like crazy, but it could also be a nuclear war. And my personal belief is that we're probably talking about something that would lead to a nuclear war where much of the earth is devastated by nuclear fire. Uh, Murray Krause says, you've seen the Venus and Jupiter conjunction at present? No, I haven't. If it's going on right now, I would have missed it because I just don't get outside at night lately. So I wouldn't have necessarily noticed it. Okay, so that is, here's a few more that just came in. Okay. It's fascinating how you can combine your knowledge of science with the history of the Bible. Rock on, Stan. Well, thank you, Betty. What beautiful planet that even Christians can appreciate. Yeah, it's pretty beautiful planet, and certainly Christians would appreciate it, perhaps more so than anybody else because of our understanding of the Creator who made it. Stan, that is sedimentary rock from seafloors. It would be naturally pliable layers. Well, it is sedimentary rock, but it was laid down uh, by tidal waves carrying the waves of shifting continents across the continents. If you believe the view of the Great Flood is what produced it. And Einstein believed in God. Well, he said God does not play dice, so he at least believed in God to that extent. Although I'm not sure he was a Christian in the classic sense. But we certainly know that Isaac Newton was a Christian. He spent more time studying the Bible and trying to figure out the mysteries of the book of Revelation than he did inventing calculus and the laws of motion and everything else that he accomplished. And so we do have plenty of examples of scientists who were true believers. We have illiterate ink, maybe solar flares over nuclear war. Well, it certainly is possible. If we see the magnetic field decaying, we could get additional radiation coming in over that. Although I think Jesus will come long before the Earth's magnetic field gets small enough to be a factor. I don't think we've got much more than another 20 to 50 years before events will get out of hand, especially if you follow the theory that 6,000 years is how much time God has allocated for human history, and then a 1,000-year millennial kingdom as the seventh millennium. We're already entering into that seventh millennium, and so I'm expecting it sooner than later, maybe in my lifetime. Murray says, and you mean there's countless galaxies out there, 100,000 light years across? See you next week and on Crypto Connie Tuesday. Yeah, there's lots of galaxies out there, and certainly one question would be the number of light years it would take for the light to get to us, and how do we explain that? And the idea right now of a variable speed of light is one possible answer to that. That nothing says that light has been constant in velocity for all of the history of the universe. But that is certainly a question because we see objects out there that are vastly distant, more than 6,000 years away. So that would be a counter argument to an old universe. Okay, and Betty says, if you see something in crypto that you think will not have a good outcome for Christians, will you give us your thoughts on it? Well, certainly, if a global world government starts to use a blockchain as a standard way for everybody to have to buy and sell, we could get into an implementation of a currency system that would be able to enforce the mark of the beast, and that would not be good for Christians, other than the extent that we are prepared to avoid succumbing to that and taking the mark of the beast in order to buy and sell. And that means you'd better have stored up about 3.5 years of food and supplies for that eventuality. Okay, that looks like all the questions that we've got right here today. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week. And see you on Crypto Connie Tuesday night.